The ranch no longer woke in silence. Mornings carried the soft creak of wheels on gravel, the low murmur of unfamiliar voices, the careful sound of hope arriving one car at a time. Jake stood at the edge of the pasture, coffee gone cold in his hands, watching strangers step onto land that had nearly been taken from him. Every laugh, every footstep felt like a test. He had lost too much to believe in anything fragile. They came with braces and scars, with haunted eyes and hands that shook. Children moved cautiously, as if the ground itself might give way. Veterans stood apart, back straight, eyes always searching. And through them all, Goliath moved like a quiet tide. He lowered his massive head, slowed his steps, made himself small. When a child reached out, trembling, the horse did not flinch. He waited. He stayed. Jake told himself he was in charge now, that he was strong enough. But some nights, fear crept back in, the kind that sat in the chest and whispered that good things never lasted. The call came on a gray afternoon. Sarah's numbers had dipped again. Infection. Uncertainty. The old panic returned like winter in the bones. Jake stood beside her hospital bed, helpless, watching machines do what he could not. When her breathing grew uneven, Goliath was brought in, guided carefully down sterile halls. The horse planted his hooves beside her bed and did not move. "Anchor," Jake whispered. Goliath leaned, solid and steady. Sarah's hand rested against his warm shoulder. Her breath slowed. Jake felt it then, the truth he had been avoiding. The horse wasn't teaching children how to stand. He was teaching Jake how to stay. Spring arrived quietly. Sarah stabilized, her strength returning inch by inch. The ranch held a small gathering beneath open sky. Amy's name was spoken aloud, carried by wind through grass she had believed in until the end. Later, Jake watched from the fence as Goliath stood beside a new child, small and frightened, learning to trust the ground beneath their feet. Jake didn't step forward. He didn't need to. The anchor was holding. When the cameras left, the silence came back heavier than before. Wind moved through the valley like a memory that refused to settle, and the ranch stood exposed beneath a sky that no longer cared about miracles. Jake felt it in the empty mornings, in the bills stacked beside the sink, in the quiet fear that survival had only been borrowed. People still came. Neighbors with work gloves and casseroles, quiet offers spoken without ceremony. Jake thanked them and sent them away. Pride can look a lot like strength when you're tired enough. The Institute covered the basics, but fences sagged, feed ran low, and repairs waited their turn. At night, Jake sat alone in the barn, listening to Goliath breathe, wondering how close he was to failing again. Then a boy arrived from town, thin and wary, his eyes fixed on exits and shadows. He wouldn't speak, wouldn't touch. He stood frozen at the edge of the pasture until Goliath lowered himself to the ground, massive body folding into patience. The boy took one step, then another. He pressed his forehead into the horse's neck and began to cry without sound. Something in Jake cracked open. He saw his daughter in that posture. He saw himself. That evening, under a flickering barn light, Jake finally spoke. About the debt. About the nights in the ICU. About how fear had trained him to stand alone. No one interrupted. When he finished, the silence felt different, shared, held. Bill nodded once. Mrs. Gable set a hand on his arm. "We're not here to save you," someone said. "We're here to stand with you." The weeks that followed changed the land. New boards appeared on fences. Laughter returned to the yard. The ranch became a place where broken stories met and softened. Not healed, but held. At sunset, they gathered in a wide circle. Children, veterans, neighbors. Goliath stood at the center, calm and immovable, the last light burning gold along his back. Jake watched faces glowing in that light and understood the truth at last. The storm hadn't spared him. The people had. Hope learned the world in fragments. In cold mornings and careful afternoons. In the ache of legs that wanted to run but forgot how. Jake watched the calf wobble across the straw, knees folding, breath hitching, and felt an old fear rise in his chest, the kind that never fully leaves once it's learned your name. Sarah sat nearby in her wheelchair, wrapped in a blanket, counting each attempt with quiet determination. "He's trying," she whispered, as hope collapsed again, blinking in confusion. Jake nodded, though his hands trembled. He had seen this before. Progress that stalled. Strength that promised more than it could give. Days passed in a rhythm of effort and rest. The barn smelled of hay and warm milk, of life refusing to quit. Goliath stood close, never interfering, only watching. Then one morning, without command, he stepped forward. He lowered his massive body until his shoulder aligned with the calf's fragile frame. He waited. Hope pushed. Fell. Tried again. Goliath shifted just enough, offering weight, not force. An anchor. In the therapy room across town, Sarah did the same. One step between parallel bars. A pause. A breath. Jake stood behind her, afraid to reach out, afraid to hope. "I can do it," she said, not loud, but certain. He believed her because he had seen the horse believe first. The realization came quietly, like light finding a crack. Amy hadn't trained a miracle. She had built a language. One that said stand when you can, lean when you must, and never mistake slowness for failure. Spring softened the land. Hope's steps grew surer, his legs no longer questioning the ground. One afternoon, he walked the length of the pasture beside Goliath, head high, shadows stretching long and proud. Jake didn't speak. He couldn't. Near the fence, Sarah rose without help. One step, then another. The wind carried her laughter across the grass. Jake watched them, calf and child, moving forward in their own time, supported but not carried. Broken things, becoming foundations.